Hello, this is Robert Rickover at Body Learning, and today my guest is Mark Josephsberg, an Alexander Technique teacher in Manhattan, New York City. And actually, Mark is going to interview me for this podcast, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Robert. Again, welcome to your show.
Thank you.
And we spoke for about like 4.5 seconds before you just started, so I hardly know the topic of the interview.
That's perfect, really. I could say anything. Well, the topic is what I would call pre-marketing considerations. So before you come up with a marketing plan as an Alexander Technique teacher, I think there's some pre-marketing uh, aspects that you need to take a look at.
Are you talking about trainees, people who are not yet teachers?
I'm talking, yes, but also about teachers who are wanting more students.
Hmm.
And as I'm sure you know, on Facebook in the last few months, maybe almost a year now, there have been a lot of discussions about marketing considerations for Alexander teachers.
Right.
It's a fairly hot topic, and I don't want to really talk about those specific ideas so much. I don't want to pass judgment of one over the other. But what I feel is missing in a way from most of them and from what I can see talking to Alexander teachers who are interested in marketing themselves to the general public, what I see is missing are some very basic uh, things they really need to do before they even think in terms of marketing. And
Hmm.
that's all I want to talk about today, not any specific marketing um, project you might have.
Oh, okay.
So I know, boring.
No, no. And
And
I'm going to guess that you're going to say something about websites.
well, I am, but not the. I want to just. I will mention websites, but I'll
Okay.
mention some other things too. But my the inspiration for this is I was thinking the other day, back in this, I guess it's the 70s. I'm sure you're too young to remember the 70s, but
I'm too old to
too
remember the
old or too
70s, actually.
young, whatever.
Yeah.
There, back when the Japanese automakers first really invaded the European and North American markets and were very successful, there was a lot of discussion about why they were so good. And there were a lot of reasons, but a reason that people commented on a lot at the time was that they, in their factories, they kept the floors clean,
Hmm.
and among other things. They looked after basic stuff like that. If you went into an American auto factory at that time, it would have been utter chaos. In Japan, everything was clean and spotless, and they would not tolerate dirt on the floor because they figured out that created a certain kind of environment that led to lower productivity, and they weren't going to let it happen. So in a way, what I'm talking about is that basic housekeeping stuff
Hmm.
that I think some Alexander teachers overlook when they decide, oh, I'm going to engage in a marketing campaign to build up my practice.
Hmm.
And of course, a major component of that kind of pre-marketing is having some kind of a website that at least tells where you are and who you are and mentions the Alexander technique. Doesn't have to be very fancy, but you know, the majority of teachers still to this day don't have that.
Hmm.
Which, you know, we're talking 15 years after the web became mature, something like that. So it's way past due for people, and it's not only as important as having a phone number, it has actually become more important than having a telephone.
Hmm.
So that's one thing. The second, just to expand on that a little bit, it does need to be a useful website. It can't be a website that you outsource to your 10-year-old high school kid because he was taking a class in web design. I mean, I have seen examples of that. Um, that might have been okay 15 years ago, but today that's going to actually repel people. So it has to have sort of a minimal standard of looking decent.
Hmm.
It also has to have an email contact that actually works. Now, I mention that, and you may laugh or snicker, but there are an extraordinarily high number of Alexander websites where the email is not properly configured. You click on the email link and nothing happens, or it goes to because they haven't hyperlinked it. They haven't actually made it clickable. So, and taking that a step further, a lot of times you will send an email to an Alexander teacher, and you will never hear back from them. Now, I mean, if I send an email to an Alexander teacher, they may not get back to me because they don't like me or whatever. But what often happens is a year or so later, I'll hear from the teacher and says, "Oh, all the emails went into this folder that I didn't pay any attention to," or "That's an email account I'm really not using anymore."
Mm.
That kind of thing. I see an awful lot of that.
Do you have a basic idea as to why all this is if the teacher actually wants to get more students? Is it something about the electronic medium?
I think so. I think that's part of it. I think that a lot of teachers still haven't wrapped their, say, especially older teachers, I guess. But I see this with some younger teachers too. They haven't wrapped their mind around the fact that the way people find them is not going to be from teachers' lists, and and they're not going to get a phone call from somebody. That's actually pretty rare these days. They're going to get an email, and I hate to say this because I'm behind the curve on this one. There's a very good chance they're going to get a text message.
Hmm.
I don't actually text yet, so I feel a little. I'm worried that I'm going to have to get up to speed on that. But there are going to be students who are going to assume when they have your phone number that they can text you.
Right.
I hate even talking about that because it's just the world I don't want to get into. But at least you need an email that works,
Hmm.
and you need to answer the email in some sort of reasonably timely manner. A week is not going to cut it. Even 2 or 3 days, most people are going to just move on.
Hmm.
Find someone else if there are other choices. Obviously, if you're on vacation, you can do things like a little setting saying I'm out of town for a while, and that's fine. Um, so those are kind of basic things. I will say another basic thing is that when someone does contact you, often at some point there is um, a phone conversation. It'd be good if you had an answering machine that works. I see
Hmm.
sometimes that's not the case. Um, and it would be good if you, when you arrange a lesson with someone, that you're actually there when you say you're going to be teaching. I know that sounds pretty obvious, but again, I've heard enough stories from disgruntled students to realize that even that can be a problem sometimes. My
Hmm.
teacher didn't take time seriously. He would just show up 15 minutes late.
Right.
We usually think of students doing that, but teachers could be guilty of that too. And these are all just basic things that I see people overlooking when they get this idea. For example, I see a lot of buzz around social media, which is a very good way to get yourself out there. But a lot of the people who think, well, I'm going to get on Facebook and Twitter and all the rest of it, but I'm just going to skip the stage of having a website, are totally missing an understanding of how that system works.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my basic message. I don't know from your point of view, of course we live in very different areas. I'm pretty much the only teacher here. You are surrounded by teachers.
Constantly. There's like 10 of them in this room.
Right, exactly. I'm wondering if you see anything from your perspective that fits in with what I've been talking about.
I don't think I do. Maybe because there are so many teachers around, I think people just go down a list here. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
If you're the only teacher in town and you don't get back to somebody for 3 or 4 days, maybe it's not that big a deal.
Maybe. If you are the only one, and even if your website's crappy, I mean, someone might say, well, I really want to get this Alexander stuff, and
right.
I can put up with it. But in a place like New York, that's not going to be the place.
It's not going to happen.
And right. I don't think it's a good idea, even if you are the only teacher.
Right. I don't either. I don't think it sets a good, I don't think it's a good beginning. I don't think it's a good way to initiate the movement,
right.
as they say,
right.
for teaching,
Right.
It sounds like you don't want you're not that interested in the student.
Right. So that's my basic point that I just wanted to make. It just seems to me, with all the marketing discussions I'm seeing, and a lot of them are quite interesting. I'm not in any way putting them down, but I do see a kind of forgetting of basically keeping the floors clean kind
right.
of idea. So that's really all I've got to say, unless you want to add anything.
I don't think so. I think it's basic stuff, and it does come. I see what you mean by pre-marketing. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you want to say goodbye to me, or should I say goodbye to you?
Yeah, I don't know. Let's talk about it for 10 minutes. You know what? I'll say thank you very much, Robert. I think this is really valuable for people, actually. Okay. And thanks for all the work that you do.
Well, thanks, Mark. We'll talk again on another topic shortly.
Great.
Take care.